These are the journalisms by way of critical aggregation, illuminated from the analytical research of a historiographer, neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental. Your engagement through a like, a share, and subscribe will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Engage.
Engage impulse engines. Engage.
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 Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Captain.
Engage emergency override.
Engage.
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 Engage forward shields, 35%.
Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
West Asia visited by U.S. Secretary of Defense. The news coming up. Iraqi resistance. Political groups vow to confront continued U.S. military presence. This is from Press TV. Iraqi resistance and political groups have taken strong exception to the Pentagon chief's unannounced visit to Baghdad and Washington's intent to continue its military presence in the Arab country on the pretext of preserving its stability. Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Defense Secretary, made a surprise visit to the Iraqi capital on Wednesday ahead of the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of the country that was followed by the collapse of the regime of former dictator Saddam Hussein, which plunged the Arab country into crisis. In Baghdad, Austin announced Washington's intent to maintain the military presence that began with the U.S. invasion in 2003, and it continued for the 20 years since, expressing hope to strengthen and broaden relations with Iraq. U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq, Austin told reporters after meeting Iraqi Premier Mohammed al-Sudani. The United States will continue to strengthen and broaden our partnership in support of Iraqi security, stability, and sovereignty. Austin, the most senior official in President Joe Biden's administration to visit Iraq, was the last commanding general of U.S. forces there after the invasion. Iraqi political groups and resistance factions severely censored the visit as an insult to the blood of martyrs and a brazen act, stressing that they'll not wait for any permission to expel the occupation forces from their country. They reaffirmed their pledge to end the American occupation and expelled the occupying forces. They slammed the Pentagon chief's remarks that hinted at the continued American military presence in the Arab country. The visit came as the anti-occupation voices have grown louder in Iraq, calling for the immediate ouster of American occupying forces and denouncing the visits of senior American political and military officials. Abu Ali al-Askari, who is in charge of the Security Bureau of Iraq's anti-terror Kataib Hezbollah, in a tweet said, "The visit of the American war minister to Iraq was an insult to the martyrs, the nation, and the history of this country." Stressing that Kataib Hezbollah will not commit to any understanding between the political parties and the occupying forces, Askari said the resistance group will not wait for anyone's permission to confront the occupation. Some political parties and their leaders should know that they should be careful in dealing with the enemy, whether in the clothing of a diplomat or in the clothing of a warrior, and remember that politicians claim to represent a nation that's against foreign domination, he remarked. U.S. hands stained with the blood of top martyrs. Hassan Salam, a representative of the Sarakun coalition at the Iraqi parliament, which is close to the anti-terror Asaib al-Haq resistance group, also blasted the Pentagon chief's visit to Iraq. To the occupying U.S. Defense Minister, I condemn your trip, and I do not welcome you because your hands are stained with the blood of Iraqi martyrs, especially the martyred commanders of victory Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and Qasem Soleimani. Salam noted. Resistance will not yield to any form of pressure. The Kataib Said al-Shuhuda anti-terror resistance group also censored the U.S. official's visit to Iraq and said it would not give in to the pressure and would press ahead with the expulsion of the occupiers. Until now, the American occupier has not looked at Iraq as a part of the circle of allies in which it walks with security, and this security is the result of the blood of martyrs of resistance, the resistance group said in a statement. This honor suffices for the Iraqi resistance that the occupying minister enters Iraq in a humble, fearful, and worried manner, like the formal official of his country, Donald Trump, who had to move between several planes in the dark of night during his trip to Iraq for fear of being hit by the resistance, it added. The Kataib Said al-Shuhuda anti-terror resistance group underlined that the resistance will not yield to any form of pressure, adding that it will wait but will not abandon its main goals of expelling the occupier from Iraq and ending all forms of occupation. Meanwhile, the Fatah Conquest Alliance in the Iraqi parliament said the country's resistance and political groups agree on the need to expel all American troops, noting that this is a definitive and national decision rather than a factional one. On March 19, 2003, the U.S. and Britain invaded Iraq in blatant violation of international law. And it was under the pretext of finding weapons of mass destruction, but no such weapons were ever discovered in Iraq. More than 1 million Iraqis were killed as the result of the U.S.-led invasion and occupation of the country, according to the California-based investigative organization Project Censored. Since the U.S.-led forces ousted Saddam's regime, Iraq has been self-governed under a power-sharing system. The U.S. withdrew its forces in 2011, claiming it had ended its combat mission in Iraq. However, some 2,500 U.S. troops still remain inside the Arab country on what Washington describes as an advisory mission. Calls for ouster of U.S. troops. Since the assassination of top anti-terror commanders, the commander of the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, IRGC, Quds Force, General Qasem Soleimani, and Deputy Chief of Iraq's Resistance Alliance, Hashd-e-Shabi, in a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad on January 3, 2020, the chorus against the American occupation has grown louder and stronger. Immediately after the dastardly crime, the Iraq parliament passed a resolution that called for the expulsion of occupying American forces, which was unanimously backed by Iraqis' political and resistance groups. Over the past 3 years, the military convoys and facilities belonging to the occupying forces have been frequently targeted by Iraqi resistance groups, demonstrating the overwhelmingly popular opinion in the country against the continued American presence. Iranian authorities have also repeatedly called for the ouster of American forces from the region, including Iraq, pointing to their destabilizing activities that are not in favor of regional countries. The anti-occupation and anti-war voices inside the U.S. have been calling for the exit of American forces from Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and other countries, which they say has failed to serve any purpose. Jacob G. Hornberger, the founder and president of the U.S.-based Future of Freedom Foundation, in an article published on the FFF website in January, asked why shouldn't Americans be brought up on criminal charges for contributing to the unprovoked murder of all those Iraqi children. One irony is that Saddam Hussein, whom U.S. officials were calling the new Hitler, had been a partner and ally of U.S. officials in the 1980s when he was waging an unprovoked war of aggression against Iran, he wrote. U.S. officials were supporting Saddam in his war of aggression because they loved the fact that his army was killing Iranians. And from Memo, U.S. Defense Secretary makes unannounced visit to Iraq 20 years after invasion. The United States Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin today arrived in Iraq on an unannounced visit. This is from March 7th, or two days ago, late on March 7th. He arrived in Iraq on an unannounced visit to discuss continued defense cooperation and to affirm Washington's partnership with Baghdad. After beginning his Middle East tour on Sunday in Jordan, in which he met with King Abdullah, it was expected that Austin would later visit Israel and Egypt for discussions on regional issues and to reiterate the U.S.'s commitment to its allies in the region. The unannounced visit to Iraq today, therefore, came as a surprise. I'm here to reaffirm the U.S.-Iraq strategic partnership as we move toward a more secure, stable, and sovereign Iraq, the Defense Secretary stated on Twitter. A Pentagon statement also emphasized that he shared his concerns on a range of shared challenges, including maintaining focus on security and stability in Iraq and countering other destabilizing activities in the region. In an address to media in Baghdad today following his meeting with Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani and Defense Minister Thabet Mohammed al-Abbasi, Austin stated that the visit and engagements underscore the U.S. commitment to expanding our partnership with the people and the government of Iraq. We're deeply committed to ensuring that the Iraqi people can live in peace and dignity, with safety and security, and with economic opportunity for all. Emphasizing the role of the U.S. military and its leading of the international coalition against Daesh, he called the defense cooperation between Washington and Baghdad a key pillar of our bilateral relationship, and the United States remains committed to this fight in support of Iraq's security and the security of the entire region. Prime Minister Sudani and I both reaffirmed that commitment today. Austin also stated that the U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq. These forces are operating in a non-combat advise, assist, and enable role to support the Iraqi-led fight against terrorism. He warned that in order to do so, however, we must be able to operate safely and securely to continue this vital work, referring to the threats and attacks against American bases and military personnel within Iraq by Iran-backed Shia militias, many of which are aligned with and operate alongside Iraq's military. I want to thank Prime Minister Sudani and Minister of Defense Abbasi for their commitment today to ensure that the coalition forces in Iraq, at the Iraqi government's request, will be protected from state and non-state actors, the Defense Secretary said. He further assured the U.S. is focused on the mission of defeating Daesh, and we're here for no other purpose, and threats or attacks on our forces only undermine that mission. The surprise visit to Iraq by America's top defense official comes almost 2 decades after the U.S.-led invasion of the country in 2003. From Al Jazeera, Pentagon chief on surprise trip says U.S. troops to stay in Iraq. In Baghdad, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin pledges continued U.S. troop presence in his fight against ISIL. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has made an unannounced trip to Iraq, during which he said the United States is committed to keeping its military presence in the country and continuing the fight against ISIL. The Pentagon's chief's trip to Baghdad on Tuesday came just before the 20-year anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion in Iraq in 2003, which led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians, toppled leader Saddam Hussein, and helped unleash forces that paved the way to the rise of ISIL. The U.S. withdrew its forces in 2011, but the administration of former President Barack Obama sent thousands of soldiers back into Iraq and neighboring Syria 3 years later to bolster the fight against ISIL. Currently, the U.S. has 2,500 soldiers in Iraq and 900 in Syria to help advise and assist local forces in combating ISIL, which in 2014 seized swaths of territory in both countries. Despite their territorial defeat in Iraq in late 2017, ISIL fighters are still launching attacks in the country as well as in Syria. ISIL attacks have killed and wounded dozens of Iraqi soldiers in recent months. We're focused on the mission of defeating Daesh, ISIL, and we're here for no other purpose, Austin said. Any threats or attacks on our forces only undermine that mission. He added, apparently referring to Iraq-backed fighters who have been blamed for attacks on facilities housing U.S. troops in Iraq. Austin, the most senior official in President Joe Biden's administration to visit Iraq in recent years, was the last commanding general of U.S. forces there after the invasion. U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq, Austin told reporters after meeting Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed al-Sudani and Defense Minister Thabet Mohammed al-Abbasi. He said these forces are operating in a non-combat and advisory role in support of the Iraqi-led fight against terrorism. The United States will continue to strengthen and broaden our partnerships in support of Iraqi security, stability, and sovereignty, he said. Al-Sudani's office, meanwhile, said he and Austin discussed cooperation between their countries in the fight against ISIL. The Prime Minister reaffirmed his government's keenness to strengthen and consolidate relations with the United States of America at various levels and fields. And from Al Monitor, Pentagon Chief Lloyd Austin talks troops' presence in surprise Iraq visit. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani is playing a delicate balance act with pro-Iran factions as Washington keeps a low profile for its military advisors in Iraq in order to subdue the Islamic State. More than 11 years after he led the last U.S. battalions out of Iraq, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin landed in Baghdad on Wednesday to discuss the future of the U.S. troop presence in the country with Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani. Following the meeting, Austin said that the current 2,500 troops in the country as part of the U.S.-led coalition to defeat the Islamic State were ready to remain there at the behest of the Iraqi government. Now looking forward, U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq, Austin said, according to reporters traveling with him. And from Wa Ali, U.S. Secretary of Defense meets with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and this is in Egypt. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin arrived in Egypt today, where he met with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. The two leaders discussed improving the strategic partnership, military cooperation, and mutual security between their countries. The Defense Secretary and the Egyptian President also discussed the growing tension between Israel and Palestine in the West Bank. Lloyd Austin has also visited Jordan and Iraq before arriving in Cairo. He met with the President of Egypt and at the Presidential Palace. It should be noted that Egypt receives military aid of $1.3 billion every year from the United States. After arriving in Cairo, the U.S. Secretary of Defense tweeted that the defense partnership between the U.S. and Egypt is an important pillar of our commitment to the region. He said that I've come to discuss opportunities to strengthen cooperation on important issues and deepen the long bilateral partnership with Egypt. And from Al-Madin, U.S. Defense Chief optimistic about the future of U.S.-Iraqi partnership. An Iraqi government spokesperson confirms that the U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin discussed with the Iraqi Prime Minister and Defense Minister counterterrorism training programs. Iraqi government spokesperson Bassem al-Awadi said on Tuesday that the Iraqi government discussed training programs for the Iraqi armed forces with U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who had arrived on an unannounced visit to Baghdad on the same day. Austin said in a tweet which he attached to the video of the moment he arrived in Iraq that he is here to reaffirm the strategic partnership between the United States and Iraq. During the visit, as reported by AFP, Austin told Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani that U.S. troops were ready to remain in the country at Baghdad's invitation, adding, "We must be able to operate safely and securely to continue this vital work." Moreover, the Pentagon official acknowledged efforts by al-Sudani and Iraqi Defense Minister Thabet al-Abbasi for their commitment to ensure that the coalition forces in Iraq will be protected from state and non-state actors. On its part, al-Sudani's office reaffirmed what Austin had tweeted, adding that the Prime Minister said Baghdad's been committed to maintaining balanced relations with the regional and international powers. According to the spokesman, there's an emphasis on joint cooperation between the two countries on the issue of combating terrorism, which is a priority topic during most visits of military leaders to Iraq. The parties also discussed programs for the development and training of the Iraqi forces. This unannounced visit kicked off in Jordan on Sunday, aiming to assure key allies of the U.S. commitment to the region, despite Washington's focus on Russia and China. It's noteworthy that Iraq announced in January 2021 the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Iraq, while maintaining the relationship with foreign forces in the field of training and empowerment. This visit comes before the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq on March 19, 2003, with Austin being the later commander-in-chief of U.S. forces in Iraq. The U.S. official's visit to Baghdad was also preceded by an unannounced visit by U.S. Chairman and the Joint Chief of Staff, Mark Milley, to Israel first, then to the U.S.-occupied Al-Tanf base in northeastern Syria. Damascus condemns U.S. General Milley's illegal visit to northeast Syria. That's a different topic. And from Al Arabiya News, Pentagon chief pledges continued U.S. forces presence in Iraq during visit to Baghdad. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin making an unannounced trip to Iraq on Tuesday, nearly 20 years after the U.S.-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein, said Washington was committed to keeping its military presence in the country. The 2003 invasion led to the deaths of tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians and created instability that eventually paved the way for the rise of ISIS militants after the U.S. withdrew its forces in 2011. Austin, the most senior official in President Joe Biden's administration to visit Iraq, was the last commanding general of U.S. forces there after the invasion. U.S. forces are ready to remain in Iraq at the invitation of the government of Iraq, Austin told reporters after meeting Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed al-Sudani. Al-Sudani later said in a statement that his government's approach is to maintain balanced relations with regional and international governments based on shared interest and respect for sovereignty, and that the stability of Iraq is the key to security and stability of the region. The U.S. currently has 2,500 troops in Iraq and an additional 900 in Syria to help advise and assist local troops in combating ISIS, who in 2014 seized swaths of territory in 2014 in both countries. ISIS is far from the formidable force it once was, but militant cells have survived across parts of northern Iraq and northeastern Syria. Austin's trip is about support and Saddam's pushback against Iranian influence in the country, or supporting Saddam's pushback against Iranian influence in the country, former officials and experts say. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have occasionally targeted U.S. forces and its embassy in Baghdad with rockets. The United States and Iran came close to full-blown conflict in 2020 after U.S. forces killed Iran's Revolutionary Guards Commander General Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike. I think that Iraqi leaders share our interest in Iraq not becoming a playground for conflict between the United States and Iran, a senior U.S. defense official speaking on condition of anonymity said. This is very biased, and the fact that they have to quote a U.S. official that is speaking under the condition of anonymity is super important there. And Austin met al-Sudani and will meet the president of the Iraqi Kurdistan region, Nechirvan Barzani, amid a long-running dispute over budget transfers and oil revenue sharing between the national government and the Kurdish government. Former President George W. Bush's administration cited its belief that the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein government held weapons of mass destruction to justify the decision to invade Iraq. U.S. and allied forces later found that such stockpiles did not exist. Between 185,000 and 208,000 Iraqi civilians were killed in the war, according to the Costs of War project by the Watson Institute for International Studies at Brown University. Austin, a former head of all U.S. forces in the Middle East, said in 2011 that the U.S. had achieved its military objectives in Iraq, but under former President Obama, the United States sent thousands of troops back into Iraq and Syria 3 years later to bolster the fight against ISIS. And from Arab News, U.S. Defense Secretary aims to reassure Middle East allies. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Jordan to begin a 3-country Mideast visit is aiming to reassure key allies of American commitment to the region despite Washington's recent focus on Russia and China, officials say. The Pentagon chief, who arrived in Amman on Sunday, is expected to press Israel leaders to reduce tensions in the West Bank and work to strengthen ties in talks with Egyptian leaders. We've demonstrated over and over again that we can rapidly surge capability to any part of the globe that we need to, but especially here in the Middle East because we've operated here for 20 plus years. Austin told reporters while visiting a joint training center near Amman. The United States has about 30,000 troops in the region and is seen as pivotal in helping counter Iranian influence. Retired U.S. Marine Corps General Frank McKenzie, who headed American forces in the Middle East until last year, said the region is significant to the United States. I think this trip's an excellent example for an opportunity to continue to tell people in the theater region that they remain important to us, added McKenzie, now leading the University of South Florida's Global and National Security Institute. The United States last week demanded that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu repudiate a call by his hardline finance minister Bezalel Smotrich for a flashpoint Palestinian village to be erased, a comment that Netanyahu on Sunday called inappropriate. The U.S. State Department has called Smotrich's comment repugnant. Austin will also be quite frank with Israeli leaders about his concerns regarding the cycle of violence in the West Bank and consult on what steps Israeli leaders can take to meaningfully restore calm before the upcoming holidays, a senior U.S. defense official said, speaking on the condition of the anonymity. The Pentagon said Austin had discussed his concern about the escalation in tensions in the West Bank and Jerusalem during a meeting with Jordan King's Abdullah on Sunday. Okay, watch this space. Remember that your engagement through a like, a share, and a subscribe will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. Pakistan's ex-PM and his party call off a rally after a police crackdown. Cancellation of public gathering in Lahore by Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party comes after the rally was banned by government. Pakistan opposition party has called off its rally scheduled to be held in the eastern city of Lahore after dozens of its supporters were arrested for defying a government ban on public gathering. You all should stop this protest because I fear the government will take this as an excuse to stop the elections from going ahead, former Prime Minister Imran Khan said on Wednesday, referring to the elections in the northern Punjab province, of which Lahore is the capital. They're trying to create a law and order situation, and that's why I'm asking my supporters that we must stop today. We're calling it off, Khan said, addressing his supporters from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Pakistani police used water cannons and fired tear gas to disperse PTI supporters in Lahore and arrested more than 40 people for defying the ban on holding rallies, which Khan was scheduled to address. We were able to see police vans taking away dozens of supporters who were chanting in favor of the party leader, Al Jazeera's Kamal Haider reported from Lahore Saturday. From Lahore. This situation has calmed down after Imran Khan called off the protest. He said earlier it was within the ambit of the Constitution and his democratic right to hold the rally. But the government banned the rally and came down with a heavy hand, he said. Imtiaz Gul, executive director of the Center for Research and Security Studies, called the police crackdown on opposition supporters as unnecessary and brutal. There was a massive police deployment to try to prevent PTI workers from attending the rally. Many of them have been injured. There are all the indications that the federal government is trying to delay the elections in the provinces of Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Gul said, speaking from Islamabad. Earlier, the government in Punjab, Pakistan's most populous province, said The ban was imposed on holding all kinds of assemblies, gatherings, sit-ins, rallies, processions, demonstrations, protests, and such like other activities across the district Lahore, to avert any untoward incident, according to local media reports. The restrictions came hours before PTI party was scheduled to hold a rally in the city to kick off its campaign for the Punjab Provincial Assembly election. Polls in Punjab, due on April 30th, were announced after the dissolution of the Provincial Assembly. Khan's PTI had called for the dissolution in a bid to force early national elections in Pakistan. The government of his successor, Shehbaz Sharif, has dismissed Khan's demand, saying the vote will take place as scheduled later in this year. The ban on protests and rallies in Lahore also came before an Aurat march to mark International Women's Day. Under what law is Punjab's caretaker government using? Massive police violence against unarmed workers to stop our planned rally? Khan earlier said in a tweet calling the government order the law of the jungle. The only job of caretakers is to ensure fair and free elections. What they are doing is an assault on the rule of law, our constitution, and our democracy. Senior PTI leader Fawad Chowdhury tweeted that the ban on protests was the new weapon of the fascist government of Prime Minister Sharif and its imperialist forces. The people of Pakistan have always fought for their rights, Chowdhury posted. In April last year, Khan 70 became the only Pakistani prime minister to be removed from power through a no-confidence vote in parliament. He's facing a slew of cases against him, ranging from terrorism and attempted murder to money laundering since losing power. Al Jazeera's hider said more than 70 cases have been registered by the government coalition against Khan, calling it a political vendetta. He said new cases are being brought against the PTI chief, with the police in Balochistan province likely to issue an arrest warrant against him. Al Jazeera's hider said the Khan's popularity has skyrocketed since he was ousted from power last April. Dozens of cases filed against him by the ruling coalition has attracted people's sympathy. He's been able to win by-elections by wide margins, and according to a recent Gallup poll, he remains the most popular leader in Pakistan. Efforts by the ruling coalition to discredit him seem to have backfired, the Al Jazeera correspondent said. On Tuesday, the Islamabad High Court suspended an arrest warrant against Khan in a case related to the alleged illegal purchase and the sale of gifts to him by foreign dignitaries while he was in office. A single judge bench off the court ordered the police to not arrest Khan until March 13th. The court also ordered the former prime minister to appear before the concerned court on March 13th in the foreign gifts case. Police on Sunday tried to arrest Khan from his residence in Lahore, but the cricketer-turned-politician evaded it. Khan had been living in Lahore since November when he was shot in the leg by a gunman during a protest rally. Since then, he only once traveled to Islamabad last week for court appearances and other cases against him. And from Irishi, workers should take back Imran Khan's sudden announcement to end the rally, it says. Just a video there. Oh, there's a little text here. Chairman Tariq-e-Insaf Imran Khan announced the end of the rally. Tariq-e-Insaf was scheduled to launch its election campaign in Lahore today with a rally led by Imran Khan. The PTI leadership has instructed the workers to go back peacefully. Earlier intermittent clashes continued between the police and the PTI workers who violated Section 144 on Mall Road in Lahore. Even before the rally, the Punjab government imposed Section 144 in Lahore for a week. A ban was placed on marches and mass meetings. On the other hand, the road leading from Canal Road to Mall Undergang has been blocked by placing a container, but police officers and workers of Insaf stood face to face. The Tariq-e-Insaf workers started pelting stones at the policemen, following which more workers were arrested. On the other hand, Imran Khan's also started consulting his legal advisors and party leaders about the current situation. And also from Ashiri videos, Imran Khan's announcement to cancel the rally instructs the workers to go back. Pakistan Tariq-e-Insaf chief Imran Khan has announced that the meeting has been canceled. Addressing the workers through a video link, Imran Khan said that the government wants to use force to cause bloodshed, to run away from the elections, but we will not allow this to happen. The workers should go home peacefully, said that the government's ready to go to any extent to escape the elections. Hundreds of workers have been arrested. Dozens of cases have been registered against me, but we are not afraid of anyone. Imran Khan said, "We believe in supremacy of law." Today's rally was also supposed to go out to express solidarity with the judiciary, but the interim government has taken barbarian extreme. This has never happened, even in martial law. And here's a clip of Imran being interviewed on Al Jazeera.
Planned election rally in Lahore. Just hours before the event, authorities imposed a ban on all demonstrations for a week. Well, joining me live from Lahore is former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Sir, thank you very much for joining the program. First of all, your reaction to the government deciding to ban rallies just as your supporters were taking to the streets.
Well, just to give you the background, the Supreme Court asked the President of Pakistan to fix an election date. That date is fixed for the 30th of April, so which means 50 days left. So my party decided to do open our election campaign by a rally in Lahore today. The police had given us permission. They had approved the route of the rally. And suddenly this morning, the permission was taken away, but not just taken away. We had these heavy contingents of police, and these people coming to attend a peaceful rally were hit with tear gas shells, water cannon with some chemical in it, which people are still recovering from. And then police just charging these protesters, breaking their cars, and so many people got injured. But one, Bilal, this guy was killed in police custody.
How do you interpret what you're describing as this government back and forth on the rules about holding a rally?
Well, the issue is that the government, all the 12 parties sitting in government and their backers, they're petrified of elections. Because so far, in the last 8 months, out of the 37 by-elections, my party has won 30 out of them. So they're petrified of general elections. They did not want the general elections.
These are facts, they're numbers. You can quantify this.
We went into the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then decided to hold elections, and this date of 30th April was announced by the president. So we were just going according to our schedule to start our election campaign. But it is clear that the government does not want election. The parties sitting in the government, they want to get out of the election. So my worry is that the idea was to create a law and order situation today, and we really restrained our workers. We called off the rally because we were scared that there would be people killed, and that would be used as a pretext to get out of the elections.
Some might answer that while the government is perhaps afraid of the upcoming elections, you're also afraid of complying with judicial rules. And police did show up at your house in Lahore only a few days ago to arrest you, to compel you to show up in court, and you evaded arrest.
Well, let me tell you something. So far, there are 76 cases against me. I'm charged for terrorism, charged for blasphemy, charged for sedition in these 77 cases. And these cases have been made in the last few months. So I've been going from one courtroom to the other. What happened was when I was shot, this assassination attempt on me, for 4 months, my leg wasn't, I had 3 bullets in my leg, so I couldn't go out of my house. So that's when they started, the cases mounted. They wanted to be me appear in courts. And so it's just a question of how do you deal with 77 cases? I mean, how many court appearances do you make? So it is just one other way of getting me out of the way to contest the elections. So they want either to imprison me or to disqualify me because they're scared that my party, thanks to the Almighty, is one of the most popular party in Pakistan's history. So because they're scared, that's why they're trying to find ways either to get out of elections or get me out of the way.
There are provincial elections, as you mentioned, in April, and then national elections later this year. If they both go ahead as scheduled, can you legitimately run in national elections if, as you say, there are 70-plus cases currently pending against you?
All the cases, I'm afraid, are frivolous. Whenever they go into a court of law, these cases will be dismissed. Now imagine, I just give you an example. There's a terrorism. I'm supposed to have committed terrorism.
Sorry to interrupt, but
and
if that's the case, and if that's why, if that's what you believe, why didn't you show up in court?
Because I couldn't show up in court. There were reasons why I was injured. So for a lot of time, for 4 months, I was house-ridden. I couldn't really, my leg wasn't, the doctors would not allow me to travel. And they knew it. But before that, I was attending all court cases. But it's only since I was shot, that's when I didn't attend courts. And since then, I have again. But look, it's physically not possible to attend so many court cases. So my lawyers are trying to sort of work out a schedule. The second problem is security. My life is under threat because the people who try to assassinate me are in power. And so we've asked from the courts, we want protection. The court must give me protection before I can appear in courts. Because, I repeat, the people who I have nominated in my assassination attempt are sitting in power.
Right, and just for our viewers, I want to make clear that they deny that, including the Prime Minister, who said he has nothing to do with the shooting against you late last year. How do you see the rest of this year playing out for you with these two elections coming up?
Well, you know, the biggest concern right now for my political party is to protect me, because there's a serious threat to my life. And the reason is, I repeat, that these people sitting in power are petrified of losing the elections, which they will, which is why they don't want elections. So the question is, how do I campaign and yet have a secure enough environment? Question is, how do I go to these courts? I made 3 court appearances, and unfortunately, there was just no protection there. That's why we've approached the court and said, look, there must be some police protection. But problem is, the people who are supposed to protect me are the ones who are trying to kill me.
But what's your plan for this year? Is it win elections and then ride it back into office and into power in Islamabad?
Well, the elections, national elections, are scheduled for October. But because we were in power in 2 of the 4 provinces, we dissolved our assemblies here. And so to hold elections, so the Supreme Court then asked the president to give a date, which is 30th April. And on 30th April, we hope to contest in these 2 provincial assemblies, which we were already in power. And what we were hoping was that since it's 65% of Pakistan, these 2 provinces, there would be a national election. And the idea for national election is because our economy has gone into a tailspin. Pakistan is facing the worst economic crisis in its history. So the idea was to hold elections, which would then bring political stability, and which would then bring economic stability. So this is really why we went for elections in our 2 provinces.
Imran Khan, former Prime Minister of Pakistan, thank you very much for coming on the program today. Pakistan's former Prime Minister.
And watch this space. Remember, your engagement through a like, share, or subscribe will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. From Wa'ali, China. What does Xi Jinping's new approach to America mean? Chinese President Xi Jinping gave a clear signal that he's now ready to stand up to America. Chinese President Xi Jinping has given a clear signal that he's now in the mood to join America's hands. According to diplomacy experts, the statement he gave on Tuesday gave a clear glimpse of his new style. And I'm looking at this translation here. This may be a little rough. I'll try my best to modify. Xi had so far avoided criticizing America by naming it directly, but now he has changed his stance. Xi accused the United States of trying to suppress China and hinder its development. Xi made the claim while addressing a meeting of the country's top political advisory body. China's official news agency Xinhua has published his speech. The American newspaper Wall Street Journal has said in a report that Xi's been criticizing America by taking its name in the internal meetings of the Chinese Communist Party, but when the Chinese media published those speeches, the anti-American comments were deleted. But this time, Xinhua has made those parts public as well. Now in public speeches, Xi used hints of specific countries to target the United States. U.S. experts have noticed that Xi's speech, now public, contained Cold War terminology. In this regard, Xi has directly criticized the aggressive stance being adopted by the United States regarding trade, technology, geopolitical influence, and the Ukraine war. Shortly before this speech on Monday, the American magazine Foreign Policy organized a discussion on relations between the United States and China. Professor Jessica Chen Weiss, from Cornell University, who was an advisor to the U.S. State Department, said in this regard that it has now become very difficult to reduce the tension between the two countries, although both countries also have opportunities to reduce the conflict. He said that a tit-for-tat approach is of no interest to anyone, but after Xi's latest speech, it's understood that the relationship between the two countries has taken a new turn. Shirley Marty, a fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank in Washington, told the Wall Street Journal that Xi is increasingly consolidating his power. In the meantime, it's possible that they're trying to blame other problems, including economic ones, on someone else. It's possible that he targeted America in this effort. However, analysts have noted that China's foreign ministry has already been using the words that Xi has now said. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry has claimed that the United States is trying to contain or encircle China. China's diplomatic chief Wang Yi and Foreign Minister Qi Kang have also given such statements. Despite this, the use of these words by Xi Jinping has been considered important, according to analysts. The statement will also be understood to mean that Xi has warned his countrymen to be prepared for a war-like situation. And from Press TV, U.S.-China tensions. In a rare direct criticism of the U.S. President, Xi Jinping has accused Western countries led by Washington of implementing all-round containment, encirclement, and suppression of China. His commitments follow a warning by the country's foreign minister, who called on the U.S. to change its reckless attitude towards China, warning it would provoke conflict. And from Axios, China warns of path to confrontation and conflict with U.S. The U.S. and China are on a path towards conflict and confrontation unless the U.S. changes course, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang warned Tuesday at a press conference. Why it matters. Tensions between China and the U.S., which spiked in 2022, soured further last month after a high-altitude surveillance balloon sent by the Chinese government was discovered flying over the U.S. President Biden has repeatedly claimed that while the U.S. seeks to compete with China, it does not wish for conflict. Ken threw cold water on the U.S. position, claiming that the U.S. so-called competition amounted to total containment and suppression. If the U.S. side does not hit the brakes but continues to speed down the wrong path, no amount of guardrails can prevent derailing or crash, and there will be conflict and confrontation, Ken said at the press conference. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby pushed back on Ken's assessment during a press briefing later Tuesday, saying that nothing about the administration's approach to U.S.-China relations should lead anybody to think that we want conflict. With all due respect to the Chinese foreign minister, there's no change to the United States posture when it comes to this bilateral relationship, Kirby added. The big picture. Ken's remarks echo Chinese President Xi Jinping address to political delegates on Monday, in which Xi accused the U.S. of instigating a policy of containment, encirclement, and suppression of China. The U.S. warned last month that China was considering sending lethal aid to Russia. Ken defended the country's close relationship, saying that together China and Russia set an example for global foreign relations and a driving force for the world, per The Guardian. And from PressWire 18, President Chinese Xi Jinping has alleged that the U.S. is leading Western countries to block China's progress. The title of this one is, Will Jinping Openly Support Russia? Now, he said America is stopping the progress of China. According to a report in Hong Kong's South China Morning Post, Jinping said the Western countries, under the leadership of the U.S., have tried to encircle China from all sides, which has presented serious challenges to the country's development. Significantly, the U.S. has stepped up its action against giant Chinese technology companies like Huawei. Apart from the European Union, the U.S. has asked authorities to remove Chinese social media app TikTok from their phones to ensure the security of their phone data. During a discussion on the sidelines of the annual parliament session on Monday, the Chinese president said that, in the view of the country's development, the external environment has changed rapidly, and there's been a great increase in uncertainty, unpredictable factors. Challenges may increase for China. The risks and challenges we face will only increase and become more serious in the future, he said. A major agenda for the parliament session is to chalk out a strategy to reduce the dependence on the U.S. A part of the plan, the Chinese government on Sunday proposed increasing spending on research by 2% to $328 billion in 2023. That's $47 billion in American money. Deepening gap between two big economies. China's new foreign minister has warned that any stagnation in relations is at risk due to rising tensions between U.S. and China. It's showing that the divide between the world's two largest economies is deepening. The U.S. claims it wants to beat China but does not seek conflict. Foreign Minister Ken Gang said at his first news briefing on Tuesday after taking office late last year, Russia-Ukraine war extending invisible hand. Ken said an invisible hand was responsible for the escalation of the war in Ukraine but did not specify who he was referring to. Ken said an invisible hand is using the crisis in Ukraine to fulfill some geopolitical agenda. Jinping has spoken with his counterpart several times since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war last year, but he's not talked to the Ukrainian president even once, according to Kiev's top diplomat in Beijing. This undermines China's claim of neutrality. The rise of Xi Jinping's China. Former National Security Advisor Stephen J. Hadley on the risk of competing turning into confrontation. A dispatch question and answer. The Chinese Communist Party's hardening at home and expanding influence abroad have brought the Washington-Beijing relationship to a modern nadir, increasing the risk of dangerous and destructive conflict. Current Chinese President Xi Jinping is a central driver of eroding relations, yet some of China's problematic behavior precedes his rise a decade ago, as evidenced in the new book, Hand Off the Foreign Policy George W. Bush Passed to Barack Obama. Edited by former National Security Advisor Stephen J. Hadley, the volume compiles once classified transition memoranda prepared by the outgoing Bush administration in 2008. Despite being prepared by outgoing administration officials 15 years ago, the document shed light on the concerning trajectory an emergent China has taken. And from the Daily Sabah, China warns against U.S. oppression, defends Russia ties. China has demanded a U.S.-led suppression of the country could lead to conflict as it defended close ties with Russia was not a threat to any country. Watch this space. We'll be right back. China's technology ambitions have been hit with a raft of restrictions by the United States and its Western allies, and Beijing has doubled down on the need to shift away from imports for sectors perceived as vital to national security, such as semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Washington has, in recent months, tightened sanctions on Chinese chip makers, citing national security concerns and the risk of the technology being used by China's military. In a rare direct criticism of the U.S., Xi told industry leaders that Western countries led by the United States have implemented all-round containment, encirclement, and suppression of China, which has brought unprecedented severe challenges to our country's development. Xi, who will be granted a third consecutive presidential term in the coming days at the highly choreographed National Party Congress, said the past 5 years have been riddled with a new set of hurdles that's threatened to weigh down China's economic rise. According to the state-run Xinhua news agency, Xi said China must have the courage to fight as the country faces profound and complex challenges in both the domestic and international landscape. In the address to delegates at the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, which runs alongside the NPC, the 69-year-old said private firms should take the initiative to pursue high-quality development. Xinhua reported late Monday. Earlier this week, Xi vowed to bolster Chinese manufacturing capacity and said the country should be able to fend for itself. I've always said there are two critical areas for China. One is to safeguard our rice bowl, and the other is to build up a strong manufacturing sector, he said. As a great nation of 1.4 billion people, we must rely on ourselves. We can't depend on international markets to save us. China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang later said the relationship between China and the U.S. needed to be based on mutual interests and friendships rather than U.S. domestic politics and hysterical neo-McCarthyism. In a wide-ranging press conference, former U.S. Ambassador Qin dismissed warnings from Western countries that China may supply arms to Russia for its war in Ukraine, saying it would not accept blame-shifting sanctions, suppression, and threats targeting Beijing. China last month released a position paper outlining its stance on the Ukraine conflict, portraying itself as a neutral party, and urged the two sides to enter peace negotiations. Beijing's claim to neutrality has been questioned by the U.S. and other Ukrainian allies, with Russia and China describing their bilateral relationship as having no limits just weeks before the invasion. Qin said China was neither a creator of the crisis nor a party to it, and has not provided weapons to any party, adding, peace talks should start as soon as possible. Beijing's relationship with Moscow is not a threat to any country in the world, he said. Qin also reiterated the official line that China would maintain the option of taking all necessary actions to reclaim Taiwan. He warned against underestimating the strong determination, the firm will, and powerful ability of the Chinese government and Chinese people to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. And from Benzinga, Xi Jinping's minister warns of U.S. catastrophic consequences if Washington continues on wrong path. Xi Jinping, minister who was promoted to power 2 months ago, held his first annual press conference as foreign minister of the People's Republic of China. During the meeting with the media, he warned the U.S. of catastrophic consequences if it continues on the wrong path. If the U.S. does not hit the brakes and continues on the wrong path, there will surely be conflict and confrontation, Gang said, according to the South China Morning Post. Containment and suppression will not make America great and will not stop the rejuvenation of China. The Chinese minister also reiterated that the passage of a balloon over U.S. territory earlier this year was an unexpected incident. He also slammed the U.S. for overreacting, abusing the force, and dramatizing the incident. Gang, who previously served as the Chinese ambassador to the U.S., said the Americans he has met are just like the Chinese, friendly, kind, sincere, distinguishing them from U.S. politicians. The foreign minister questioned the U.S. stand on the Russia-Ukraine war while comparing it to Taiwan. Gang said Washington needs to explain its plan for the destruction of Taiwan. He added, the U.S. should not talk about sovereignty and territorial integrity over Ukraine if it does not respect China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And we'll be back with more news. Remember, your engagement through a like, share, or subscribe will accelerate us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. 20 years later, U.S. Senate may finally end authorization for war on Iraq. A U.S. Senate committee backed legislation on Wednesday to repeal 2 authorizations for past wars in Iraq, paving the way for a possible full vote in the Senate before the 20th anniversary of the last invasion by American troops. And from Breitbart, Senate committee votes to end military authorization for Iraq, Gulf News, and Gulf Wars. The Senate will soon hold a vote to officially end the authorized use of military force in Iraq and Kuwait, which could close the books on the Iraq and Gulf War. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed a bill to end military authorization with a bipartisan 13-8 vote on Wednesday, The Hill reports. The bill, sponsored by Senator Todd Young, a Republican from Indiana, and Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, comes after multiple attempts to repeal the authorized use of force. According to Kaine, passage of the bill would be significant because future presidents may otherwise be able to abuse their ability to send troops to either country, despite troops being long withdrawn from both conflicts. Although the 1991 Gulf and 2002 Iraq wars are over and Iraq's no longer an enemy, the authorizations for use of military force remain on the books, said Kaine in a statement. Congress has a constitutional and moral responsibility to repeal them so that the future presidents can't use these authorizations as a blank check to send service members into harm's way. I'm glad we're one step closer today to repealing these outdated and unnecessary AUMFs. I welcome Majority Leader Schumer's commitment to bring our bill to the Senate floor in coming weeks, and I urge my colleagues to pass our bipartisan bill so we can formally end the Gulf and Iraq wars. Schumer voiced his support for passing the bill once it reaches the Senate floor. This Senate Foreign Relations Committee has reached an agreement to move forward on the repeal of the Iraq AUMF, Schumer tweeted. We need to put the Iraq war behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with. This Senate Foreign Relations Committee has reached an agreement to move forward on the repeal of the Iraq AUMF. We need to put the Iraq war behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with, Schumer said. The United States launched the Gulf War in August 1990 following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. The conflict lasted just a few months before troops were withdrawn the following February. More than 200 U.S. troops were killed. The invasion of Iraq began in 2003 and former President Barack Obama withdrew troops in 2011. More than 7,000 U.S. soldiers died in the Iraq War, Brown University estimates, As many as 300,000 Iraqi civilians died in relation to the war as of 2019. Young said, current Iraq-U.S. relations will only be strengthened if the bill passes into law. I'm encouraged by today's vote, and it's now time to bring the legislation to the Senate floor, Senator Young said in a statement. Later this month will mark the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, and today Iraq is a partner of the U.S. and critical to efforts to counter Iran. Repealing these outdated AUMFs will demonstrate America's commitment to Iraq's sovereignty. Just as important, it is vital to restoring the proper role of Congress in authorizing the use of military force and affirmatively stating when conflicts are over. And from Fox8.com, Senate panel passes bipartisan bill to repeal Iraq Gulf War authorizations. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed bipartisan legislation on Wednesday to repeal the Iraq and Gulf War military force authorizations, which are still in effect after the conflicts ended. The bill, sponsored by Senators Tim Kaine and Todd Young, passed on 13-8 vote in the committee. Kaine said the 1991 Gulf War authorization and the 2002 Iraq War authorization are decades behind the U.S., but they remain on the books and can technically be misused by a sitting president. Congress has a constitutional and moral responsibility to repeal them so that future presidents can't use the authorizations as a blank check to send service members into harm's way, Kaine said in a statement. The Gulf War ended in '91 after a brief U.S.-led military campaign in Kuwait and some parts of Iraq, and former President Obama pulled U.S. troops out of Iraq in 2011, bringing an end to the 2003 invasion. Attempts to end the authorizations for the use of military force for the Gulf War and the Iraq War have been introduced several times before in Congress, including an effort last year that got snagged in congressional business, or got snagged in congressional business. There are some signs the AUMF repeals are now picking up steam. A companion bill was introduced in the House and Senate. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has vowed to back the legislation once it comes to the floor. In a tweet last week, Schumer said, "We need to put the Iraq War behind us once and for all, and doing that means we should repeal the legal authority that initiated the war to begin with." In a Wednesday statement, Young said he was encouraged by today's vote. Later this month will mark the 20th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq. Today, Iraq is a partner of the U.S. and critical to efforts to counter Iran, Young said. Repealing these outdated AUMFs will demonstrate America's commitment to Iraqi sovereignty. And watch this space. We'll be back with more news.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Loci is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man.
I find your arguments strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled.
You mean they should have respected us?
Of course.
Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
The whole notion of
Unemotional.
logic.
Completely pragmatic. And we poor irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical
The whole
humans,
notion of logic.
Which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed.
Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
the whole
Will you
notion
try to
of
understand
logic.
how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me.
The whole
I'm a
notion
scientist.
of logic.
You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud?
Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
The whole notion of logic.
I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
And this is South African MP Shaik Emam on the Ukraine war, Western hypocrisy.
When the people in Palestine are losing their lives, being raped and murdered, there's no cry from anybody, no passion. When the same thing happens in Syria, we hear nothing. When the same thing happens in Libya, we hear nothing. When the same thing happens in Iraq, we hear nothing. When the Ukrainians are violating the rights of other Ukrainians, particularly in the Donbass region, there's nobody crying for those people. What is the reason for that? What about India? Why is there nobody in this country raising the concerns of the Indian minorities, of the Christians and the Muslims whose rights are being violated by the Indian government? Nobody in this country is saying anything about it. Now, NATO went on and bombed many of the Russian allies. Russia could do absolutely nothing about it and stayed out of it. What did Russia say? Demilitarization. Stay away from my Russian borders. If you notice what has been happening since 1990, they are coming closer and closer and closer to the Russian border until they will make Russia so weak that Russia will have no other option but to give in to them. That is what it is all about. But who is the root cause of this whole problem? It is clearly the West and the United States of America that is the root cause of all the mayhem and chaos and destruction all over the world. Please don't clear. Let's talk about the biological laboratories which is funded by the Pentagon in Ukraine. Where is it coming from? Why are they getting involved in those? Let's talk about the number of people that were massacred by the Ukrainians who have been detained without trial. Nobody has said anything about that as well. Okay, let's talk about the shelling of the hospitals and the schools and the massacre and the mass graves that were found in Ukraine. Nobody says anything about that. Now, what is Russia asking for? Russia is saying, stay away from my borders and stay away from me. All you have been doing, and remember, Ukraine is being used as a fool by the United States and the West, and they're falling into the trap like many other countries have fallen in the trap previously, and that's what it is all about. When the people in Palestine are...
I'm going to open up a channel here. Beam me up.
Beam me up, Mr. Spock. Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up. Beam us up. Quickly. Beam us up home. Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up. Mr. Scott, prepare to beam us up. Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up. Beam us up. Scotty, beam us up fast. Stand by to beam us up. Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up.
Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up.
No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.